So recently I was interviewed and was discussing the life of Malcolm X, Malik Shabazz, rahimahullah, right? May Allah have mercy on him. And, one thing that I've noticed very interesting in the Muslim discussion these days around the topic of Malcolm is it's interesting in how he is also contrasted with Martin Luther King. And I have noticed that both Muslim and non-Muslim alike are many people who they kind of portray Malcolm as the troublesome and rebellious Negro, and they portray Martin as the congenial Negro, right? And the problem with this is that for those that see Malcolm as the so-called troublesome Negro, the rebellious one, then the only value that they see in him is particularly as that. So therefore they're kind of always looking for, especially they're always looking for something to rebel against. Whereas in contrast, many will see, Martin rather, as being this, congenial, nice, non-threatening Negro. And therefore, either somebody who's looking to try to have an articulation, or maybe their goal is to try to present themselves as being non-confrontational, being congenial, then they will tap into that particular way of interpreting Martin. But some will also see it as a weakness, right? They'll see Martin as the emasculated Negro and Malcolm as the strong Negro. And therefore, for those who have a tendency to look at the world as if it's all a nail and the only tool they have is a hammer, right? This becomes really problematic. And that we actually find that there are elements of Malcolm that are actually quite congenial, right? And there are elements of Martin that are quite rebellious. In fact, maybe their methods or their rhetoric may have differed a little bit. But if you look in the way that, especially if you look at what they've done to Martin after his death, right? And this is very much a byproduct of secularization, is that you should read this book. It's called Race and Secularism in America, and I think it's edited by Vincent Lloyd. And the interesting thing about in that book is he really shows how, in the wake of Martin's death, for instance, he's portrayed as being this sort of like humanist figure who didn't fight against white supremacy. He fought against oppression. He didn't, he used a very secular language of humanism, not coming at the problem particularly as a Baptist preacher. And this is actively done to rewrite the narrative of who Martin was. And therefore, in a similar way, this is also done to Malcolm, right? So at the end of either in the midst or at the end of the interview, I was asked about what can Muslims do to reconnect with the legacy of Malcolm. And I said, well, I really don't know if it'll be so much a matter of reconnecting or actually connecting to begin with, in that I think Malcolm is a person who is more talked about than actually understood. So just some food for thought on the legacy of Malcolm X. May Allah have mercy on his soul.